Why is the iPad 10 using the first generation Apple Pencil? Why didn't the iPad Pro get landscape cameras? Why are Dongle? Who is iPad? Can Tim Apple? All this and more. Want the latest Apple news, leaks and rumours? Subscribe and ring the bell. So there's a lot of questions to be answered about the new iPad range from Apple. It's confusing. There's too many iPads. I think in this video we're going to talk about the camera position. We're going to talk about the charging coils that are there for the Apple Pencil and why that makes a difference. We're going to talk about the keyboard Folio. We're going to talk about laminated displays because all of these things actually make sense. They're just not necessarily great choices. So we'll start off with the camera position. Obviously, in the brand new iPad 10, we have the camera for the first time in an iPad in the landscape orientation, which is great if you spend your day basically doing Zoom calls and FaceTime and that kind of thing. That's a great place to put a camera. However, it does come with a little bit of a compromise in that when you put your camera there, you can't put other things there, and in this case it seems that that other thing is the charging coils for the Apple Pencil 2, which otherwise would be sitting there to charge up. I understand that it's a little bit confusing and a little bit annoying that we're still using the first generation Apple Pencil. I think there is an argument that they should have just renamed this as the Apple Pencil SE and gone with the iPad SE as the base, like, curvy edge design, and maybe brought the new Apple Pencil to this one. But obviously, with the issue that we have with the camera being at the top, makes it very difficult to charge. We've also seen this brand new keyboard Folio that has been designed specifically for the iPad, nothing expensive version. It's such a confusing setup. It's very, very difficult to know what anything is at this point. But the square-sided base iPad, that's $449 for some reason, that one we'll call the iPad. The old one we'll call the 9th gen iPad. So this is the 10th gen we're talking about right now. So Apple's created this 10th gen iPad keyboard Folio, which is basically like the Magic Keyboard and Trackpad, but instead of having the magnetic attachment on the back and the floating design, it attaches on the bottom to the keyboard with magnets along the bottom edge. Now here's where they could have fixed this. Now if they'd gone with the existing Magic Trackpad, I understand it's like $50 more expensive, but I'm guessing with the economies of scale that you would get from, you know, using it on the base-ish iPad, what they could have done is just flipped the Apple Pencil 2 charging coils to the bottom, and then all of this would have been fine. It could have just hung off the bottom of the iPad as it sits in landscape mode quite happily and not had this issue. Obviously smart connectors need to go onto the back, and then that would work exactly the same way as it does for the iPad Pros. That surely would have been the best way to address this, but apparently no, that's not what we get. Very strange. I also don't quite understand why Apple is so opposed to using Bluetooth for a keyboard. That just that baffles me a little bit. However, this is the choices that they've gone with. That would have been a great way of fixing this, I think, but there we go. I did also think potentially that the Apple Pencil that exists right now, maybe there are a lot of schools out there that are currently using this, and obviously there's the Logitech crayons and things like that that use the same tech as in the first generation Apple Pencil. I think Logitech has now come out directly with just the USB-C version of it for charging, which is a much more convenient way than Apple's weird converter dongle thing. However, I do think there's probably a lot of schools out there that maybe have quite a lot of these Apple Pencils in stock, and the base iPad, the old base iPad at least, was hugely popular in schools. Now, it might be that Apple gives really, really good pricing to schools on these. Instead of the $449, maybe they come in at like $350 for schools, but previously I think they were like $300 for schools, so yeah, I don't think it's going to be super popular in the way that it was in the past. But speaking of schools, and as we come to laminated displays as well, remember that this is, as I said, something that is used in schools a lot. And when you get a broken display on an iPad Air, an iPad Pro, anything along those lines, you are replacing not just the display glass, but you're replacing the entire LCD, as well as the touch surface and everything else. The non-laminated displays, like in the new 10th generation iPad, and in the previous 9th generation and similar, you're only replacing that glass. You're not having to actually replace the LCD display itself, which makes these repairs much, much cheaper to do. And from my own experience, my kids have both got 9th generation iPads. I think within a month, one of them had managed to crack the digitizer. The joy of that was that I was able to then physically just remove that, buy a replacement from eBay. It cost me like $20, something like that. replaced it, it's basically as good as new. I say basically, the Touch ID home button on it is very difficult to reattach to the display surface, so that has kind of fallen in a little bit. It still works for Touch ID, it's just that it's not as easy to press as a home button. However, 10th generation iPad, guess what? We fixed that, because the 10th generation iPad has moved the Touch ID sensor to that power button. So that is actually quite a big advantage. All you need now is the flat digitizer glass to replace, and I think that might be part of the reason. I think schools and educational establishments that are basically loaning these things out to kids need to be able to replace those quite easily and quite cheaply, and that might be a big reason for it. So I understand people like the laminated displays. There's a very good reason that they don't exist in the cheapest iPads, and I think that's it. Now, the fact that we talked earlier about the camera position and the fact that the iPad Pros didn't get the landscape cameras, whereas the base iPads did, and everyone thought that was a disadvantage for the iPad Pros, I think this is very clearly because of those charging coils in the iPad Pros for the Apple Pencil. And as I've said before, I think when we see the next generation of the iPad Pro, what we might see is that the Apple Pencil does charge on the bottom edge of the iPad when it's on the Magic Keyboard and trackpad, because you've got a whole free edge along there that works quite nicely for that. And then at the top you can put your landscape camera, much, much better. I think that is probably what we will see in the next generation. I haven't heard anyone mention this yet, but surely that is the solution. But you guys have also asked some questions about iPads, and I think we should cover everything iPad in this video. So, first of all, Team Kinetix asks, iCave answers, I occasionally film video on my iPad Pro. Does this make me a bad person? Yes it does. You have mentioned though that you like editing in LumaFusion. Obviously there will be the opportunity to do that in DaVinci Resolve soon as well, which will be great. But yes, it is good that you can actually do everything in one device, as we did with the MacBook Air when this first came out. I filmed everything on the FaceTime camera on it, edited it on it, all on one battery charge, got it all uploaded to the internet, and I think we used maybe a third of the battery. It's pretty impressive what you can do now with a single device. The iPad does make sense for that. It's awkward to use it as a camera, but if you need a big old viewfinder, and I know a lot of people for accessibility reasons use the iPad with its camera for viewfinding, and also with the Pros using LiDAR to be able to detect doors and that kind of thing, it's actually a great device for that. I was being a little sarcastic when I said that it makes you a bad person. Also from Team Kinetix, iCave answers, do you think that the M2 iPad Pro was a planned and deliberate incremental chip update, or do you think it's a placeholder product because the redesigned iPad Pro wasn't ready or was too expensive to launch in a looming recession? I think Apple is basically recession-proof. From what we've seen, iPhone sales don't seem to be affected by the recession ever. iPad Pro may be a little bit more than the iPhones, but I don't think that the recession has anything to do with it. I don't think this is a placeholder at all. I think an incremental chip update is fine in a product like this. It's not designed for people with an M1 to upgrade to. The reason that the upgrades like this take place is basically because if you've bought a previous generation, you're ready to upgrade, you might be less willing to upgrade to a product that's been out for 18 months than you are to the latest, freshest version, and that's very much the case with phones as well. There aren't huge leaps from year to year with these, and there don't need to be. It's best to have a new product ready when you want to upgrade. If we were talking, months and months and months and years between upgrade cycles, people might look outside of Apple's ecosystem and see if there's something fresher to pick up over there. And Daniel Goldsmith asks, iCave answers, let me ask you this, why can't all USB-C iPads use the Pencil 1 now that we have an adapter? Also, why didn't Apple keep the Magic Connector in the same place so that we can use the $300 Magic Keyboard and drop it by $50? This new Folio makes no sense. Apple spent money it didn't need to here. And I completely agree. We've already touched on the Folio stuff in the past. I think that the Magic Keyboard would have made a lot more sense, because then you could have put that charging coil for Apple Pencil 2 on the bottom, and then we wouldn't have needed Apple Pencil 1 or Apple Pencil SE at all. It makes no sense. I don't get it. But I also do think that there is a difference in the technologies in Apple Pencil 1 and Apple Pencil 2. There is a difference. I know you've got the double tap gesture on the Apple Pencil 2. I think that's the only real difference, but it also pairs, you know, using the contactless and the wireless charging method on the side. So maybe there's more differences that we're not quite aware of that Apple's had to build into this. My thoughts, though, is, I mean, magnets will work around a camera, so there shouldn't be a reason that you couldn't put the charging coils at one end of an Apple Pencil 2, or the third Apple Pencil, so that the charging coils don't have to overlap with where the camera is, and then you could just stick it around the camera in future. And hopefully, once we get teardowns of this 10th generation iPad, we might find that there are charging coils either side and magnets for a future Apple Pencil, so that we could unify it with one Apple Pencil to rule them all. Anyway, guys, thank you so much for watching. If you've got a question for a future video, use hashtag #ICaveAnswers down in the comment section, and I'll be delighted to answer it for you. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next one. Want the latest Apple news, leaks, and rumours? Subscribe and ring the bell.